88.1 WHOV welcomes you to the Pastor's Study. The Pastor's Study in your church or any church is a place where the pastor goes to collect his thoughts, hear from God, study God's Word, and develop ideas and thoughts on what direction the church needs to take in leading others to Christ. The Pastor's Study is where the road to salvation is paved and the mysteries of the Bible revealed. The Pastor's Study on WHOV is a talk show that allows you, the listener, to come inside to find out more about the ministers of the gospel in the area and the good works they're doing across the region, the nation, and the world. Now here's your host, Pastor Kevin Swan of Ivy Baptist Church in Newport News, Pastor Ray Johnson, and Pastor John Young of Empowered Believers Christian Learning Center. The Pastor's Study is now open to the public, so come on in and find out God's plan for your life and his people.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to the Pastor's Study on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon here on Smooth 18.1 WHOV and iHeartRadio. Pastor Kevin Swan, Ivy Baptist Church. Again, we're practicing social distancing, and we're not in studio today. Let me take a moment to thank Station Manager Jay Lane and Assistant Station Manager Evan Anderson, who right now is working the board at the studio on our behalf. To make sure that we can do the show remotely. And so thanks, we appreciate you, man. And I'm excited to do this show today. Now, the good news is we got two people who have been hanging with us the last couple of weeks. The bad news is we can't figure out how to get more than three people at the time. So Pastor Brent, we want to give him a shout-out. We want to give a shout-out to Pastor Young for listening in with us. Can't call in again because we have the lines tied up, so you got to leave your comments and messages on our Facebook page. But I do want to do my introduction, as I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. It's been my extreme honor. It's been my honor since Pastor Young and Pastor Johnson are not able to do the introduction, and I have the chance. I just want to let the listening audience know how proud and privileged I am to be able to introduce our co-host of the show. She did all the relationship stuff, and she's on the air with us right now. Ladies and gentlemen, Albion Lyons.
You know what? Let me tell you what I heard in Sunday's message, okay?
Uh-oh.
It said, slow obedience.
Come on.
Disobedience.
Come on.
Okay? Sir, you've taken an awful long time to get in line with what God has called you to do in my proper introductions. I just want you to know that you're being totally disobedient to the Lord. I think you need to know that.
The Bible says, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord.
Yeah,
Stand firm.
Yeah.
So, everybody else.
It also lets you bust it wide open. You keep acting up. That's what it is here.
How are you, Miss Alvin? How's your family?
I am doing really well, really well. I mean, let me tell you guys, though, there's finding balance when you are not leaving to go to an office and coming back at a certain time of day is really challenging. As much as I talk to people all the time about, proper balance and taking care of themselves and all of that stuff, I am profoundly guilty of blurring the lines between work and play and rest. The lines are very blurred for me working at home because I am admittedly a workaholic. And so it's harder for me to shut down when I could just take care of that one last email or that, or take this last call because after all, I don't have to go anywhere to do this. So while I am doing wonderful, I am recognizing that there are areas of my own personal development that I have got to do better on. But let me tell you what I do not struggle with, Kevin Swan. I do not struggle with my ability to do this one job flawlessly. And it is my incredible privilege.
Hey, just hurry up.
To be able to introduce the man of the hour, the one who understands that in the pendulum swing between right and wrong, one must always lean to what is right. The man who is not afraid to say what needs to be said when it needs to be said because justice shall prevail.
Come on.
And it shall run through the plains like waters of living. Okay, we can just keep going on that thing. Okay,
on. Come on.
Okay, all right.
Come on.
Let it flow from on high. Okay, because right here in our space is a man who is serious about his business, his ministry, in street and in court.
Come on.
It is the only, the singular,
Come on.
never to be compared to another,
Come on.
the Commonwealth Attorney of the city of Hampton, the pastor of law
Come on.
and order, the man who makes prison ministry a part of your life, my brother, Anton Bell.
Hey, man, Kevin, that's how you do it.
Hey, yeah, listen. I gotta admit, that was pretty good, Albie. That was good.
That was good.
So here's something next week. So if the three of us are on next week, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna introduce Anton first next week, and then you can introduce Albie. All right?
I got it.
Okay, then. All right, now.
Yeah.
I got it. That's my sister.
How are you, sir? How you doing?
Great.
You doing?
I'm great. Actually, I'm really doing well. Because you know what? I recognize that even in the midst of chaos, there's opportunity.
Amen.
There's opportunity. And so you have to take advantage of the opportunity and see what God is up to. Because so many times we're looking at what's going on that's negative, but we got to start changing the lens in which we see the world and which we view our situation. And right now, I'm enjoying what God is doing because he's up to some stuff.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. For those who are really walking with God, you can see God moving in this.
Come on.
So,
He is truly
you're absolutely right. So look, let's real quick before we go to break. There is something we need the listening audience to know about, and that is the May 5th elections in our area have been postponed, moved to May the 19th. So there's a speed delay in the elections, and so it will still take place as normal. The precincts will be practicing social distancing if you choose to go, but also there is a deadline for the request of an absentee ballot, and that has been moved also to May the 12th. Now, we can't emphasize this enough that if you are not comfortable going to the precinct, you still need to vote, and you still can vote by requesting an absentee ballot. Now, there are two ways you can request an absentee ballot. Number one is you can contact your city or county registrar's office and request a ballot. The other way is that you can go to the website elections.virginia.gov, and there you can make sure that you can get an absentee ballot. So, again, registrar's office in your city or county, or elections.virginia.gov. Either way, you have until May 12th to request an absentee ballot. Okay? So please make sure that you do that. And we want to make sure that people understand how important it is for them to exercise their right to vote. So that's the law. Alvian, remind the people of how important it is that they need to vote.
It matters. What you do in the local elections matters the most. It impacts you more intimately than state and federal elections. School board, city council, mayor, all of those elections or campaigns, they will affect your life on a more intimate level than the state and federal. So please do not neglect getting your vote out. And again, if you feel uncomfortable, do the absentee ballot, but make sure your voice is heard. So please vote.
And take the time to do a little bit of research on who you're voting for.
Yes.
Do not just cast a vote without thought or time, because if you decide who is going to be leading and you don't know who that person is or what he or she stands for, what their motivations are, what their agenda is, if you don't know that information, then you are party to whatever ends up happening. Take the time to do a little bit of research. Do not just decide because mom and them said or because Poppy and them said. Take the time to find out for yourself, does this person represent my values? What do you want to see happen for your city, what you want to see happen for your state. All of those things work in partnership. So our responsibility in voting is not just to go. That is absolutely important. Better you do than not. But do your due diligence to know who you're voting for and what he or she is going to do for the city that you live inside of and the state that you call home. Take the time to do the research.
Absolutely. And again, local elections matter, ladies and gentlemen. You got, in some cases, the mayor race. You have city council races. You have school board races. All of them are vitally important to our cities and our localities. So, again, it's very important. Don't just get caught up in the presidential election that's coming in November. You need to get caught up in local elections as well. So, real quick, again, the election date has been moved from May 5th to May 19th. There are two ways. If you want to request an absentee ballot, you don't want to go to the polls, you can still vote by requesting an absentee ballot. In order to do so, you have until May 12th to request that ballot. You can request it by contacting your registrar's office in your city or county and requesting. Number two is you can go to elections.virginia.gov. Now, here's what's very important. They ask for a reason for why you are requesting an absentee ballot. You want to answer number 2, A as in apple. Number 2, A as in apple, which says for illness sake. And the coronavirus is considered an illness. So therefore, you will be granted an absentee ballot. So again, if they ask you for what reason do you want one, answer number 2, A as in apple for illness. That will link you to the coronavirus. You'll be able to get your ballot. All right, so please exercise your right to vote. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back on the other side, we're going to get into our question of the day. Got a good one today. Y'all need to stay tuned, please. we got a good one. As a matter of fact, when we go to break, tell Mama and them, tell Pookie and Ray back and tune in. Because this topic today going to be crazy. Hope you enjoyed the show so far. It's Smooth 88.1 WHOV. On Smooth 18.1, WHOV, iHeartRadio. We got a barn burner today, ladies and gentlemen, for the question of the day. So I want to make sure you have the opportunity to also offer your, and you can do so by going to our Facebook page, Pastor Study. The question of the day is already up, and you can leave whatever answer that you choose to leave, and we will try to get your answer shared on the air before the show is over. So, Pastor Law, let me start with you because we have been wanting to do this show for a long time.
Yes, we have.
And we just didn't get around to doing it. And it's actually one of the reasons why you started coming on the air.
On a regular basis, yes it is.
Because you wanted to have this conversation, and you kept saying, we ain't had a conversation yet. We haven't had a conversation yet.
No.
So
he kept putting me off, y'all. He kept putting me off. I'm coming for him already.
So today we're going to have the conversation, ladies and gentlemen. And so, Pastor Law, we want you to set up the show today and tell us what we're going to talk about.
Okay, we're going to talk about black-on-black crime. Now, we know it's real. We know it happens. But the question is, how do the black community really feel about black-on-black crime? Not what we say, but through our action and our behavior. How do we really feel about black-on-black crime? And I kind of want to deal with the issue of this. Is black-on-black crime the hypocrisy of the black community, or is it the hypocrisy of the black church?
Boy, you trying to throw flames to death.
I need to call the fire department.
And I'm still trying to understand how you throwing the church up in there, but we're going to have this conversation.
We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to definitely talk about it. So, okay. The first question that you raised is, how do you feel black people feel about black-on-black crime?
Black-on-black crime. Yeah,
that's the question.
When we hurt each other, when we kill each other, when we rob each other, how do we really feel about that And I'm not talking about what we say, but through our behavior and our response and our actions, how do we really feel about it as a community?
Well, Alvin, you want to start or do you want me to start? How do you want to go?
You start first.
Okay. So I think that certain communities are perhaps more apathetic to black-on-black crime. I think in general, if there was a crime in your neighborhood where you live, Anton, where you live, where I live, there was a black-on-black crime in our neighborhood, we're going to make sure, I believe, that justice would be served, regardless of who it is that's doing the crime. Because we want our communities to be safe. Now, I do believe that in other communities where there are more impoverished communities, it's a greater challenge because maybe violence is more prevalent. Maybe there's more of a code. And Anton, you lived in the hood, man, so you know what I'm describing here. Yeah. There's less likely a chance to call out those who have done something wrong. The notion snitches get stitches and all that kind of stuff.
But you know what? It's not even about the stitches, because the truth of the matter is, yeah, that's an element of it. But sometimes we use that as the overarching issue and the crutch that we want to lean on, which is, I'm afraid that if I say something, then there will be a consequence or a ramification of it. I want to address the apathy issue, because the apathy issue is more prevalent than we want to talk about it. It's more real and more of a prevalent issue than I think we really want to admit. I could tell you, for example, as a 15, 16-year-old living in the hood, and I remember looking out my bedroom window and watching somebody shooting the car up, trying to shoot the car up, trying to blow it up. And I remember that the dysfunctionalism of that environment was so just in me, because I had grew up in it. I literally went back to my bed and went to sleep, not even thinking about it. And as a child, that could be very traumatizing watching that. But if you grow up in it, to you, dysfunctionalism after a while becomes the new norm. It's what's normal.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm trying to make, right? So what isn't normal in communities like that is when, let's say, the police come in, and let's say it's a police-involved shooting, and let's say the police officer is white, then you're more likely to see people walking the streets and signs and all that kind of thing. But it seems that when we do it to ourselves, it's less likely that you're going to get that kind of reaction because, again, to your point, maybe people in those communities are seeing it so much they become immune to it. And maybe there's a feeling of helplessness because maybe in times past they did try to do something and nothing was done. So, or they felt like nothing was done. So it becomes a scenario of it is what it is. I mean, if you put enough people in the same community space, a small confined space, who don't have economic opportunities, who have, in some cases, lack of educational opportunities, who have dysfunction in the home like you just described. I mean, let's be honest. What do we think is going to happen? And then you put guns and drugs in those same communities. What do we think is going to happen? So, I think, though, if when I look at where our church is, our church is near the south, is in the southeast community. There have been marches in the southeast community against black-on-black crime. So I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist, but what I will say is that the level of outrage when it is done by a police officer is typically, in my estimation, much higher and more pronounced by the black community than it is when we do it to ourselves. Absolutely. And we all know the statistics of most cities. It's 90% of the homicides in most cities, including yours, Anton.
Absolutely.
90% of the homicides are black-on-black crime.
Matter of fact, higher than that. higher than that. And
so then how do you reconcile that then? You know, because again, 99 out of 10 of the crimes are black on black, but the one that might be police involved, that's the one that gets the outrage, right? That's what if you're going by what your topic is today, that's what it appears to look like.
Well, you know what? We in Hampton haven't even had a police-involved shooting in like maybe it's been a couple of years, and that was actually caught on video, and it was clear-cut, crystal clear-cut. So there wasn't a really, outrage or anything like that. I think the last outrage that I've seen was actually a Newport News shooting, and I believe that's when we had those forums at Heritage, and then we had another one. I think it was at Hampton High. I think Virginia Unity led those forums. That was about 3 years ago?
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago. Yep.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years. But then there was some questions about that one because the question was whether the guy was armed or unarmed. But nonetheless, it was a very, very high intense issue. But at the same time, Newport News had 20-plus murders that year, and the overwhelming majority of them were black-on-black crimes. I didn't hear anything concerning those other crimes. And so my question is, do you not say anything about those crimes, but you only say anything about another crime where, when it was all said and done, these officers were, I believe, they were not even charged because it was later discovered that the guy may have been actually carrying a firearm and that the officer shot him in self-defense. Now, I didn't review the case, but I remember Howard Gwynn doing the press conference about that, and he cleared those officers. And Howard Gwynn is African-American.
Yeah, so again, I'm not sure if it's what we can definitely say, Anton, is that the reaction of certain homicides are definitely different. I don't want to go so far as to say that the concern is unequal, because I don't know that. I believe, to me, now just me speaking, all life is important. And if it's black on black or if it's white on black or whatever the case might be, you know this as your role as Commonwealth Attorney. Your job is to protect the citizens of Hampton regardless of color, right? Your job is
but you're speaking as an individual. As a community, have we become so desensitized because of the dysfunctionalism that we no longer see it as a major issue? One of the things that I've been trying to do is, even with the coronavirus that's been going on and the deaths, because there's so many of them, I was like, Lord, please do not make me, or please don't allow me to become desensitized to one person that has died. Because at the end of the day, although it's over 55 people who have died, that's 55,000 families that have been impacted. They will never see that loved one again. They will always mourn the fact that loved one is gone. And I said, I don't want to get so caught up in the numbers that I forget that one person that I may not personally know, but nonetheless, they died as a result of this horrendous disease and virus, and they probably died alone in a hospital without their family. And I don't want to become desensitized to that. Have we, as a black community, have seen so many murders that we have become desensitized to that one individual that may have been shot at 1 o'clock in the morning on Shell Road. Nobody may not know him personally. That may be Pookie's son, but nonetheless, he was somebody's son. Have we become that desensitized?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly believe there's been some measure of desensitization. Yes, because 9 out of 10 of these shootings are us. So if again, if you keep seeing that and you keep seeing it, and by the way, if you keep watching media, music videos, and all the other stuff that portray this kind of lifestyle, yes, we have become desensitized to it. And it is causing an issue. And so if you're just tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, we're having a real conversation. We're giving Rona a break today, okay? We're going to give Rona a break. And we're talking about the issue of black-on-black crime. How do blacks really feel about this issue? Have we become apathetic to it? Does it not even register anymore? Are we still concerned? We want to hear from you. Go to our Facebook page, The Pastor Study. Leave your comment. We're going to share it on the air as we get an opportunity. So, Ms. Albion, we haven't heard from you yet. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I always find it interesting when crime is broken up into terms like black on black, because I never hear white on white crime. No. So I always find that I always feel like whenever you have labels in such a way, and that is not to suggest at all, because obviously, we all know that I, do research as a byproduct of. And so, the data matters. I'm not ignoring data points. But what I also understand is that how the narrative around the data also matters as significantly as the point itself, right? So I find it interesting that nationally it's ingrained into our conversation that what black people do to black people where crime is concerned, but it's not set in context, because the reality is most black people live around other black people. Most black people don't live in all white areas. So if crime is going to be committed, the crime is likely to be homogenous because your area is homogenous. So if I were in Japan, you're not going to have a conversation about Japanese on Japanese crime. Why? Because the demographic is homogenous. So you're just going to have a conversation about crime rates, period. And it's the aberration that catches people's attention, which is why there is such an issue when you get a situation like, a police violence or a police-involved shooting, because it's an aberration. So we make a big deal about those things, as that is true in most things in life. We make a big deal about the thing that is outside of the norm. So the answer is yes, we are desensitized to it. That's why we don't talk about it very much, because we see it all the time. We also understand contextually that that's how it's going to go down, because most of us don't live in upper middle class neighborhoods or upper class neighborhoods where the racial demographic is going to be different. So I have mixed feelings when I hear it. I do also recognize human condition. If somebody slaps your wife, you would lose it. But what's interesting is we don't freak out about, which is terrible, but we don't freak out about the violence that happens inside of the home the same way we would be upset about if the perpetrator was somebody outside of the home. If you talk crazy to your kids, there are so many families that cussing is normal in their house. Parents cussing at children is normal in the house. So nobody says anything about that, because that's just how we talk in our house. But let the teacher cuss your kid out, and you want them fired immediately. So the nature of our human condition is to ignore what we do intimately, but to examine what is done in the exterior or public environment. So I think there's a level of honesty we have to come to about the way that we relate to any kind of situation. And here's another piece. We are also those people, as a people of color, that when we hear about sniper shootings, mass shootings, let's tell the truth about what the first thing we're thinking.
Come on.
I hope that is not somebody who's black. I just hope that's not one of us. And when we find out that it is Cody McCullen, everybody breathes a sigh of relief that thank God it is not one of us out there acting a fool again. So there are things that we don't talk about, because that is the nature of our culture, to not talk about the stuff that's going on inside the house. How many times do you hear what happens in this house stays in this house?
Right.
That is so ingrained in our culture that we take those same rules of keep it in-house and we apply it to the entire race. So we don't want to have a conversation about what we're doing to each other, because that's what's happening inside the house. But we will have a conversation about anything that's taking place outside the house. Anybody acting funny towards our people, that's a problem. So there are multiple layers associated with why we orient the way that we do, that we have to be, if we can get honest about those things, and we can give ourselves permission to not worry about how we were perceived by non-members of the community when we deal with our stuff, we might deal with our stuff more. But there's still a perception element associated with everything that we do as people of color, because we're often on the receiving end of the injustice, be it in fact or in narrative. So I think we have so many pieces.
So and that was well said, Al.
Oh, it was.
And let me just play the other side because it's radio today, right?
Here we go. Oh, Lord. Right. Here he go.
So wouldn't non-blacks, whites, Hispanics, others, wouldn't they say that there's dysfunction in their homes too? That there's dysfunction in their race of people too, but it's not leading to them shooting and killing each other at a disproportionately higher rate than what we're doing to ourselves.
Well, I beg to differ in that. Let's go back. I beg to differ in that because if you remember, maybe a couple of shows back, maybe 2-3 shows back, we were talking about crime during the coronavirus shelter in place, and I told you guys there was going to be an increase in domestic violence in certain neighborhoods. And I said it's going to be typically your suburban neighborhoods. And what not just the stats, but what I have seen over my 20 years of prosecuting is in those cases, you tend to see more domestic violence, like York County, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake. Now, since the coronavirus shelter in place has been in place, that's where you see those double homicide and murder, suicide cases increase in those cities. York had, I believe, 2 of them back to back. Virginia Beach, you see those. So it happens. It just happens in a different way.
Yeah, you're right. So it happens, but again, when you're looking at under normal circumstances, and I think we all agree this is not a normal situation that we're in. But you're right. Under these circumstances, you got more people that are confined to their homes. And isn't it interesting, though? I don't know. Can you comment, Anton, on the fact I haven't heard a lot of incidents in our communities, homicides, since the coronavirus shutdown took place. I haven't heard a lot of them.
I was going to ask the same thing. Have we statistically seen any changes?
We've had 2 homicides 2 weeks ago. We had 2 homicides back-to-back in the same week. And
now, how does that compare to what we were experiencing or the rate that we were experiencing prior to Corona? Is that equal, more or less? You know, when we look at it if we look at a snapshot in a 30-day period of time, or now in the 60, you know, because we've been at it about that long now, how do those numbers compare, you know, current Corona versus pre-Corona cases?
Where we were
before
this year, prior to, it is a decrease. Because we had about 3 in January. I'm talking about Hampton. 3 in January, 3 in February, and we had 2 back-to-back, and they were in March. And so there's been none in April. So, and we're halfway in April now. So I guess it would be a decrease. So that would be accurate. That would be a decrease.
Interesting. And is that just around homicides, or because there's a difference? Because, you know, obviously we all
shootings definitely.
I was just gonna say that because we also have, you know, we all work very closely with law enforcement. You are law enforcement.
Right.
Virginia Unity Project works very closely with law enforcement around, you know, really helping to heal our community. And our sister communities as well. And one of the things that the police always say to us is the difference between a homicide and a shooting could be a millimeter. You know, like, so where a lot of times we talk about the homicide, but we're really not having the conversation about the number of shootings that have actually taken place. So you spoke to the numbers in terms of the homicides. What does it look like in terms of the shootings? Just to come back to that point a little more clearly, what do those numbers statistically look like?
There's been a decrease.
And are we talking significant? Because that's surely what it feels like to us in the community, that it feels like a significant drop, but is that statistically accurate, or is that just our feeling around it?
No. I would say that is enough to see a difference. You definitely see a difference in the numbers. And it's less arraignments because of the shootings and so forth. So, yeah, it's definitely a decrease. No question about it. When you have less people on the street, you're going to have less crime. There's no question about that. So that's a simple solve. The problem, I think, is when we try to return to normalcy, do we then go back to the behavior that has been accepted as the new norm?
Right.
And to kind of piggyback on what you shared earlier about the taboo of not sharing things that take place within our community, outside with those outside our community, I think we have to go a little deeper too. Because I remember talking to a veteran prosecutor when I was a younger prosecutor about just crime in general. And I said, do you ever worry about someone ever coming after you for being a prosecutor? And this guy said to me, and it kind of like threw me off, but then I started looking around and actually observing. And I said, this guy has a point, which saddened me, which was he said, no, he said, because you've heard that railroad crossing that most people talk about, where you don't go across the railroad tracks. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, most people are not going to cross the railroad tracks to come after me in reference to trying to get payback or revenge for me doing my job. He said they'll shoot each other before they'll come after me, because they see shooting me as, if I shoot him, there's going to be a consequence, A, and the consequence is most likely to be severe, B, and I'm more likely to get caught, C. And I thought about that thing, and I said, that's deep, that we choose our victims.
Oh, absolutely.
We choose who we're going to victimize.
And the psychology that goes along with that. And so if you're just tuning in, everybody, having a very interesting conversation on black crime. In particular, how do blacks really feel about black on black crime? And we've been having this interesting discussion. We want to hear from you. Go to our Facebook page, put your comment on our Facebook page, The Pastor Study, and we'll try to share it on the air. Hey, guys, Matthew shared a comment and said really he thinks that the issue in the black community is the demise of the black family unit, which is causing a lot of what we're seeing happening, the dysfunction that we've been talking about and all the stuff that we don't like to talk about, and then we'll keep this in-house, as you said, Harvey. So what do y'all think about that? The demise of the black family is kind of causing this.
I 100% agree. 100% agree. Because if we look at, and you've brought this point into conversation before, Kevin, where you've talked about the fact that this is not the worst place we've ever been in as a nation, and certainly as a people of color. As in slavery, we didn't do each other like this. And we clearly were in a much more horrible situation. We didn't do this in the civil rights movement. We were so band together around the exterior enemy, and that not being, and let me be clear, we were not calling our white brothers and sisters enemy. We're talking about the enemy of injustice. We were so clearly united around that we didn't turn on each other. Generally speaking, we were really focused on something together. So there has been real pain that has come with progress. And when I say progress, I'm talking about the fact that financially, obviously, we have more wealth than we've ever had in the history of our nation, as in people of color. But the progress that we have made around profitability has come with enormous pain. And that pain has been, in a lot of ways, self-inflicted. That is in no way to suggest that racism, racial injustice, disproportionate opportunities, the fact that the playing field isn't level. I am not in any way negating any of those facts. They are capital FACTS. However, the underlying point that exists completely parallel to those facts is that we didn't do this before when things were absolutely horrible. There has been a breakdown that exists for us that is not about what's going on around us. It's about what's going on in us. And my favorite quote from Bishop Jakes says that a ship does not sink because of the water that it sits inside. It sinks because of the water that gets inside of it. The enemy used to be on the outside of us as a community. The problem is the enemy's on the inside of us now. And that begins at the home. And Anton and I spent a year just going through our community, having these conversations about what's happening inside of the home, because whatever happens inside of the home always ends up spilling out into the street. And it begins with the coupling. So if we're going to talk about black-on-black crime, right next to that is black love. Because if we loved each other the way that we should, and we took care of each other the way that we should, that whether we end up together forever or not does not change the fact that we can effectively co-parent. We can treat each other appropriately as former partners. But we have gotten to a point that we become enemies even in the coupling and the uncoupling, that we will do things to hurt each other inside of those experiences that only have domino effects thereafter. And every culture has problems. Every culture has deteriorations in terms of marriage rates and the endurance of intimate relations. Every culture has violence, and all of that is true. But what are we doing? Instead of paying attention to what everybody else is doing, what are we doing? And there has been a deterioration not only of the families, of values. It is true that the church is practically irrelevant in the black community these days. Now, I will say a whole lot more folk are praying to Jesus now that Corona is here. But prior to Corona, we were headed off the cliff. We're about to be as unchurched and non-believers as other parts of our community, which was historically untrue for people of color. We loved us some Jesus no matter what kind of foolishness we were doing. But for the first time in my life, I hear just as many black people say that I don't believe in God as I do with white people. There has never been a time in my life that I have heard that. Yes, we are changing. And this is no disrespect to our European counterparts, but that has not been a part of the way that we did things as a community of color. We were singing about Jesus in the fields. So now we got a little piece of change and Jesus doesn't exist? I mean, like, what in the world is going on? So, I mean, we obviously can look at this in layer upon layer upon layer, but I 100% believe that the deterioration in the home that actually begins with the deterioration in coupling has been the fundamental issue that has destroyed our community. And if we don't do something about it, we will ruin each other indefinitely.
Yeah, that's real good, Alvin. That's really good. And by the way, Alvin, I just want to let you know, most of the comments today on Facebook have been in support of you. Now, it pains me to say that to you. But I just want you to know.
Because our listeners know I love them. I love our listeners.
Now listen, Anton, we're almost out of time already. It's hard to believe the show is flying by. But you made a comment about the church, man, and we got to spend the
I was about to jump in there with it. I got you. Because my
Alvia just stuck her toe in the water just talking about the church.
She stuck her toe in the water because she knew we were going to go there. So let's go there.
Go ahead, Anton. What you want to say about the church, man?
Okay, so all I'm saying is this. You know, Alvin was saying that together we were trying to right wrongs during the civil rights movement. We were together in the fields during slavery time. We were together. We had one thing in common. Back then, and even leading up to now, before Corona started going on and everything, the one thing we really had in common as a black community really was our faith, to be quite honest with you. And what has happened is you've seen the demise of the black church in the black community. And you have to ask the question, why isn't the black church relevant in the black community anymore? So is what we're dealing with, is it an issue of a hypocrisy of our community, or is it a hypocrisy of the black church? Because the black church has lost its relevancy in the black community. And that's the question I got.
Now, you're saying that as a lawyer and as clergy, you believe as a clergy. Yeah. You're saying as a clergy member, you believe that the churches in the black community have lost its relevancy.
Has lost its relevancy. Now, here's the thing: it ain't all churches. So let's before everybody says, not my church, Pastor Law. Before you come for me, it's not every church. clearly it's not every church, because there are a lot of churches that are winning souls, like my church. I love my church. We're winning souls. People's lives are being transformed. You know, I met my wife at my church 17 years ago. And so our lives are being transformed from churches that are preaching the word and are relatable to your everyday average person. I'm not talking about those. But as a whole, have we gotten away from the church because we feel that the church is no longer able to relate to my issues and can meet the needs that I have? Now, here's the thing. Many times we have relegated the church to who God is. The church ain't God. And so sometimes we're worshiping the church or worshiping a pastor, and we should have been worshiping God. And that's why when the church didn't do what you thought they should have done for you, you ran away from the church thinking that, oh, they made me mad or whatever, but you were really running away from God. And you put the two in the same category and made them interchangeable, and they're not.
So you let's keep bringing fire with that, man. I can't even go against you on that. But okay. I'm just come on. Community. Even a generation ago, the church was the central hub of the community, right? We all know that, right? The church wasn't just the church. It was the political station. It helped people to do voting rights, and it helped people to read, and it helped people to do all of this stuff. And so for as long as the church has been in the black community, the black church has been much more than just a church. We know that, right? But in this generation, that's no longer the case, right? So to Alvian and to Anton, what do you think happened to where the church stopped being the central hub of the black community? What do you think happened?
Well, somebody just texted me. Someone just texted me. They said the devil attacked the black family, and when he attacked the black family, he attacked the black church.
So I would agree. But what I think was part of the problem, and I think continues to be one of the problems, and folks aren't going to like this, but I just got to say what I mean.
Say it.
I think that when the church at the leadership level decided that it was more important to be popular than it was to be principled, and we started to use the pulpit as a mechanism for celebrity rather than conviction and principle and real guidance, which still speaks to some of the fundamental issues that exist inside of our community, the invalidation that many men of color feel creates a desire to have a space in which they matter. Now, I can talk all day about what that really means in terms of how black women love their men when they come home and how our black men should love their women, okay? But there is a real factor for men of color feeling invisible inside of our community. Not healing that issue and taking that into the church turned too many pastors into celebrities. And when that celebrity transition happened, that I'm going to have one space where I can be king, we walk away from allowing Jesus to be king, to allow God to reign, because we can't be in competition for the throne and still be able to make a difference inside of the pews. And when you do that kind of stuff, and I don't believe that it's intentional. I think that it's funded because obviously, psychology is what I do. I think it is just part of the human condition to want to be seen, to want to be heard, and to know that you matter. And because you cannot get that, or you feel like you can't get that in mainstream white America, you find a space in which you can create it. But as soon as you do that, you stand before God instead of God standing before you. And everything flesh begins to be nurtured. So when the further we get away from allowing ourselves to be absent of the body, and that God can completely inhabit who we are, and that it is he who is speaking through us, and we trust that all these things will be added onto us if we first seek the kingdom, then we would have a different truth. But we lost that In the civil rights era, in the history of America, the pastors were, their strength was because they spoke on behalf of God, and it didn't seem like ego came first. It really was about, how do I lift my community? And because they were in the business of lifting the community lifted them. But when they started lifting themselves, that is when we started to have problems. So I'm not saying this is true for every pastor, but I am saying that when we are broken in our personal lives, we will absolutely break the people in our professional lives. And the business of being a pastor is a professional responsibility that is kingdom mandated. So we've got kingdom business that is happening corruptly at this point. And like I said, I'm not saying that it is intentional. I'm saying that it is the byproduct of the human condition to want to matter.
Yeah, so Rob, and both of you were well said, and we don't have enough time for my rebuttal, but I wish we did have more time, because I would come back at y'all. But talking about the church of the Lord Jesus Christ. You can't be talking about the black church.
Wait a minute, but Kevin, all we're trying to say is this: the church should be what God has created the church to be, and that is preaching the word that people will be able to live that abundant life that Jesus has talked about. And to be quite honest with you, the church so often looks so much like the world. And if you look like the world, then how are you gonna win somebody to Christ if you don't different than the world?
Yeah, I get that. And again, maybe this is the part two, right? Because what you all are describing about the church are the internal factors of what the church has done, leadership and shift to personality, moving from principle to personality. I get all of that. We only have like 3 minutes left, though, so let me just say this real quick. Robin wrote in, she said, it seems as though the church is more business now than saving souls. The church should operate with some business principles, but the soul of the church and the community has gotten lost in the monetary aspect. So I think this is what people feel now more than anything else of why the church isn't as relevant. Because most people who don't go to church feel like, rightly or wrongly, that the church is a money grab. It's about, supporting the pastor's lifestyle or supporting some other entity that doesn't really go with what they believe the gospel or the church should be in line to do. What do y'all say about that real quick?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I don't want my pastor to be broke. I'll be honest with you about that. Because if you're preaching the word and you living the word, then you need to be able to make a living based upon preaching the word. The Bible talks about that. So I ain't got a problem with that. But I do not believe in putting your pastor on a pedestal because he's not God. See, there's a balance, and we don't understand balance. That's the problem. We don't understand balance. Because you do not put your pastor on a pedestal. He's a human being just like everybody else. And so as a result of that, you should treat him as such with reverence because he is your pastor. But do not make him out to be a celebrity, as Alvin talked about.
Yeah, and
I'm 100% with it. I agree.
Yeah. We got to end here. Why does the show get so good at the time?
Well, we said it was going to be like that.
From the beginning. We told them.
We're going to have to pick up where we leave. We're going to have to do a part two to this because
we can do that.
There's so much to this. And
it's so many layers.
It is. And so thank you, Anton. We had your conversation, sir.
Yes,
you good now?
I'm good.
And we're going to keep having it. We're going to keep having it. So
I think next week we should make sure that we do Black Love as it impacts Black violence because it's Relationship Tuesday next week. So let's talk about it.
We'll do it. We got to go, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, be blessed and be a blessing to someone else. This is Smooth 88.1 WHOV.